God, it's so good. So good.
Dark Shadows? Good? You might be saying, I've gone too far this time. Hey y'all, my name is Mike Vaughn, and in this video, I want to make a good case why Tim Burton's 2012 film Dark Shadows is good, actually. Before we begin, please consider giving this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more great content. Now, back to the video. Tim Burton has been on a hot streak with the series Wednesday, and now Beetlejuice is set to do incredibly well with audiences. The latter project is something that fans have been begging for literal decades, and you know, it's really smart for Burton to draw from that well again. After all, in terms of his directed films, it's probably his most beloved and iconic work. I did an entire video on this, but I think the marketing team behind Beetlejuice 2 did a fantastic job at getting even the most cynical fans among us really hyped for this movie. So, because I'm an old fuck, I grew up on Beetlejuice the original on VHS and later the animated series. This was definitely my gateway to Tim Burton movies. And as jaded as I've become as a film journalist and film lover, I was so on board with how Beetlejuice 2 looked. A number of outlets were projecting big box office numbers ahead of its release date. And nobody needed this win more than Burton himself. This comes at a rather down period in the quirky director's career, with a string of films that failed to connect with audiences or turn a huge profit like his previous films. In the bigger picture, the movies weren't having the kind of lasting impact either. Do you remember Dumbo or Big Fish? This is crushing, as the director in his prime was a true auteur in every sense of the word. Indeed, few directors are a byword for a certain kind of feeling and overall atmosphere. Like, when you say it's very Burton-esque, you know exactly what I mean. But what if I told you there was a hidden gem in Burton's work that I feel is worth rediscovering? No, I already covered that one. Link in the description. Dark Shadows from 2012, well, let's not mince words, was a huge flop with audiences and critics. It currently holds a 35% on Rotten Tomato. So, for context, Dark Shadows was a gothic horror soap opera which ran from June 27, 1966 until April 1971. And it became ABC's highest rated daytime series. This ran for 6 seasons but had a whopping 1,225 episodes. Unlike now, when you're lucky to get 10 episodes. Outside of the show itself, it spawned 2 sequel series, films, novels, comics, radio dramas, and other tie-ins. The series was groundbreaking in terms of being the template for other horror shows, but also amassed a huge and loyal fan base. One such fan was Tim Burton. Here's an interview where the director talks about his memories of the film and how he tried to capture that oddball flavor of the series.
It's not like the most not logical thing to bring to the screen, because part of what I loved about it was just the strangeness of it, you know, the weird phenomenon of it, you know, something. Part of it was the time, you know, being a weird teenager at that time, going home in Burbank and watching this strange supernatural. So that was what was. It's more about a feeling than actually remaking it. So we just tried to capture the weird soap opera style and acting of it, and it's a strange thing to try.
And obviously, I have a soft spot for this movie. Full T, I haven't seen a lot of Dark Shadows, certainly not all 1,000 plus episodes, but every fall I do love dipping into not only Dark Shadows, the series, but Dan Curtis's other horror outings. Indeed, this is all prime Halloween season viewing, but what I gather from Shadows that I have seen, this is a really weird and campy time. There are ghosts and witches and time travel, but also Curtis and company really did a lot with a limited budget. So why do I enjoy this movie and think you might as well? First off, this is an incredibly gorgeous looking movie. Burton's flair is of course stamped all over this project. Yet I forgot just how this movie has this epic scope. This is thanks to using 6-time Oscar-nominated French cinematographer Bruno Dubonel. With grand sweeping shots and more dynamic camera movement, Burton is clearly out of his comfort zone, and it totally works here. Because it makes sense since this is a horror comedy draped perfectly in velvet gothic melodrama. It's worth noting that this is the one and only time that Bruno and Burton worked together. The narrative was, at the time, considered lacking focus and strong characters, and you know what? I don't get that criticism. We get a strong sense from the very first few minutes as Burton, with the confidence of a director working for decades, does the following: establishes the characters, the lore, sets up the family ties theme, the theme about classism, the desire of our hero Bartimus, and how it neatly folds into the Collins family. It does all this in the first half an hour. Now, is there some fat that could have been trimmed? Sure, but I honestly didn't feel bored at any point. The above mentioned themes might not be groundbreaking, but it all hangs together quite nicely. Keep in mind, this is based on a horror soap opera, and this is no dig on the genre, but the themes don't really need to be that deep. The production design is amazing, and setting this around Halloween is perfect. The pumpkins, the spooky mansion, ghosts and witches, all through the Burton filter. Oh boy, just let it wash over you in this amazing orange and black wave. The film certainly has an old school Hammer horror style vibe, something that he did to great effect in Sleepy Hollow. And it also harkens back to Universal horror with several nods to classic monsters and tropes. This film was made on a reported $115 million budget, which for 2012 is kind of insane. Like, with inflation, this would be equal to about $250 million in today's money. Now, I'm not sure if the movie looks every bit of that, but damn, the look is just breathtaking. And yeah, even if the CGI is a bit wonky. Not to mention the amazing Oscar winner Colin Atwood making a total meal of these costumes. It's just a feast in terms of overall presentation. The performances are also stellar, and you know what? I'm gonna make a bold claim. Yes, bolder than the one I'm already currently making. This is Johnny Depp's best character since Jack Sparrow. Hear me out. Watching this closely, Depp devours the role, and it's really a joy to watch. Sure, he plays out the fish out of water type, not unlike, say, Edward in Edward Scissorhands, but it's in the way he carries himself, and the devil really is the details in terms of how he moves and emotes, things that aren't necessarily on the page. All this without ever winking at the audience. Eva Green, who would go on to work with Burton several more times, makes a ham dinner out of the role. Michelle Pfeiffer, Bella Heathcote, and Helena Bonham Carter all shine. The supporting cast is fantastic as well, with Chloe Grace Moretz, Johnny Lee Miller, Jackie Earle Haley, and Christopher Lee, the absolute legend. Lee, it's worth noting, reportedly made his 200th film appearance here, and the last one he would do with Tim Burton. Of course, there's Alice Cooper, and at the time, the last remaining Dark Shadows cast all make cameos. It's the kind of fan service I love. The performances, interestingly, tap into the soap opera vibe, but it never goes full parody mode. This is an aspect that was intentional.
Well, it was more about kind of creating the feeling that the show gave me when I watched it, because it's not something you could. It was such a unique phenomenon, this soap opera on during the day. I mean, that's part of what its energy was. So that's kind of hard to translate to a movie. So what became important then to me was to try to give the feeling of what I remember about the show. I mean, obviously the show was very serious. We tried to treat this serious. We didn't make it campy or anything. There's more humor in this, but tried to let the humor become more situational and based on the fact that, you know, this guy's been locked away for 200 years and how he'd relate to things. So, but the spirit, the kind of soap opera acting, the style of acting, the kind of vibe of it, that was important to try to get from the original show.
Dark Shadows was panned by critics, and even with an impressive $250 million at the box office, didn't even break even on its massive budget.
Balls.
Clearly, this was a passion project that you only get to do if you build up enough goodwill over the years and a lot of box office. Warner Brothers was willing to gamble on Burton, as his name and style was certainly enough to get attention no matter what the project. I hope that someday this movie finds a cult following, because it's a silly, campy bit of fun that isn't that deep but totally entertaining nonetheless. And gosh, it is so much fun to watch around the spooky season. Thanks for watching, and hey, please check out these other videos, and I'll see you all in the next one.